Well. Hello, folks. I hope you can hear me okay. And welcome to this live tutorial. This is a live tutorial. It's pretty much like an ordinary one, except there's no editing or anything, which is kind of convenient. But there's also not any notes or anything like that. There's no one else here. I don't have a laptop or anything. I'll prove it. Nothing, just a comb. So I don't have another screen or anything. It's just coding live. But because we're using the Trongate framework, and because the Trongate framework is really easy to use, I think we'll get through this one without any problems at all. So I think this is probably going to take about an hour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to build a fabulous task manager. Yeah, I know we're all a bit sick of that type of thing, but let me show you the kind of thing that we're going to be building. Now, we may have a little, it works, good. That's a nice happy, not even an accident, it worked. I'm surprised. So I'll show you what I'm going to be building here. It's going to be something like this. So I'll zoom you in a little bit. And you can see that I can say something like third task, submit. So I'm adding tasks on here. We've got a nice little pop-up modal. Fourth task like this. And we can update tasks like so. Updated. I'll set this one to finished. You can see that we've got strike through text here. And we can also delete tasks, all without leaving the page. So that is what we're going to be building here. And nobody's impressed by a task manager. I get that 100%. But the whole point of this is really to teach you how to use this thing, which is the Trongate API Explorer. And as much as to-do lists and all of that are kind of boring, it does have a certain value because it lets you see how the code works. And you can focus your energy on that without worrying too much about the usability of the app or anything like that, you know. So that's what we're going to build. Normally, we could build something like this in 2 minutes, just using the Trongate PHP framework. But because we're going to be using a lot of JavaScript here, it'll take a wee bit longer. But it's all very easy. And we are just going to be using primarily vanilla JavaScript, just the way you like it. So that's what's coming up, and let me clear the decks. Now, this was my little practice run. I'm going to do the unthinkable. The unthinkable shall be done. I'm going to go in and delete my database here. So something like this, and I'll just say delete or drop the database. And I'll also delete the actual thing that I had just built before coming on. Okay, so there we are, and now this has disappeared, and so has this, and really and truly it's going to be a fresh start here. Okay, so I hope you'll join in, and I assume that you have the Trongate framework, which is available from trongate.io. And you can go to the downloads page here, and you'll be able to download the desktop app. All major operating systems are covered. It's 100% open source. Of course you can use it commercially. Nothing uncool is going to happen. I'll leave a link in the description, okay? Also, my hands are so cold. Also, just to let you know, I'm going to be using XAMPP here. I'm just using XAMPP to give me MySQL and Apache. Now, XAMPP is available from the Apache Friends website. If you go to your favorite search engine, just search for XAMPP download. You can get it again for Mac, Windows or Linux, and it's highly recommended. So I'm going to be using that as well. Okay, so all aboard the fun bus. Shall we code? Shall we code? Oh, people, do you hear me? All right. so let's do this then, and we're going to start off by opening the Trongate desktop app. I'll do a little reset here. So we'll have a nice, honest tutorial. I'll just make sure you can see the screen, and I would be super grateful if anybody could confirm if you can hear me okay. Alright, in any event, I'm going to click Create New App. I'll call this one API Tutorial. You can call it anything you want, but that's what I'm going to go with. We're going to have a base URL and the database connection details. I'm just clicking here because I'm happy with what it's suggesting. Now I'm going to choose a location for the app, and this is going to be inside htdocs. We're going to generate the app, and don't forget to smile, and there you go. Alright, now if your app, if you're watching this into the future and you have a page that looks different, don't worry. Designs change all the time, but the fundamentals of this framework will never change. Trongate is V1 forever. Now let's go back to the desktop app. We're going to create a new module, new Trongate module, and I'm going to call this task. Okay, task, that's the singular. So task, it's going to suggest a navigation label of manage tasks, and that's okay with me. And then it's going to suggest a navigation icon. Now I'll leave out the icon, I think, and let's just add some properties. So it's going to open up the properties builder, and we'll keep this really simple. I'm going to have a variable character called title, okay, because each task is going to have a title, and I'll have a boolean for finished to indicate whether or not the task is finished. Now, if you want, you can change these values, do whatever makes you feel good. But as for me, I'm quite happy, so I'm going to submit. Now it's asking for a URL column. We're not going to bother with that today, but just so you know, a URL column is often referred to as a slug in other content management systems. So basically the idea is that, let's say you have a task called clean the room. Well, you'd have a column in the database called URL string. I think it's URL string or URL title, and it might say clean the room, and you can add that to the URL. It's kind of useful for search engine optimization purposes, but we're not going to be doing that today, so we'll just keep this empty. Now the default order by is going to be ID ascending. Let's generate the module, and here we go. Alright, so that has successfully generated our module. We can click into the module here, and immediately, again, if your design looks different, don't panic. Designs change all the time, but you should now have a task manager. As a matter of fact, if you look on the top left here, you can see we've got manage tasks, but we've also got manage articles. If I click on to manage articles, for example, I can create a new web page. I'll just say test. Now I'm zoomed in a little bit here, but just look at this. We can add text. We can add things like how about a nice picture? And look at the fabulous uploader that you get with this framework. There is nothing close to this. Certainly not in the PHP community. Look, it's going to give us a little spin. Oh yes. Let's add this to the page. And isn't that fantasticola? We can center it. Zoom you out a little bit. How about a nice button or two? Check it out. It's so easy. Maybe we'll have a second headline. Look, it even says second headline. It's actually ridiculous. How about if we center the buttons, make them a little bit bigger, hit escape, hit save. All of this stuff you get out of the box. No command line, no third-party libraries, and no rewrite culture. That's the Trongate framework. Now, is anybody in the room here? Thank you. We have somebody who's joined us, says the sound is fine. Is that... Choco. Oh, nice to see you. Am I reading that right? Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate your vibe. I'm just going to take a sip of this coffee here because my hands are really cold. And I'm hoping this will heat me up. Alright, so let's get back to this. We have we not, created a fabulous page. We have a beautiful content management system, but that's not why we're here. We're here to focus on the tasks. So, as you can see, we have our tasks module. It's all working. Now I'm going to create a new task. I'm going to just say task 1, submit. Let's do another, view all tasks, create. I'll say task 2, submit. Let's do one more. Let's say task 3, and I'll make this one finished just to make life interesting. So I've created 3 tasks. I hope you can still hear me. And there you go. Wasn't that easy? And it's incredible how you can get all of this so quickly. Look at this. I can even add a comment. Here is a comment. All of which dated, time-stamped, fully secure. Is there any PHP framework that can do this, ladies and gentlemen? Certainly not with these types of benchmarks. Anyway, as good as that is, this is all using PHP. Today, we're going to be focusing on the JavaScript side of things, the API manager, as I call it. Because there's a lot of JavaScript developers out there and a lot of mobile app developers, and they might like this thing. So this is really one for them, okay? So if you look on this Manage Tasks page, you'll see a button that says API Explorer. I'm going to click into here. And you can see we have a whole bunch of API endpoints. These have all been generated automatically. They are all secure and they are all ready to go. Speaking of security, by the way, somebody said to me recently, you know, I'm a bit nervous at the way that you can just waltz into this thing and the admin panel and all of that. Somebody seemed a little bit nervous. So let me just reassure you, there's nothing to worry about. I'm going to open up my text editor here, and I'm going to open up the app that I've just created. Here it is, right, where on earth is it? Here it is, here. Okay, I think that was my one from earlier on. Right, here we go. So I want to just quickly show you, inside the config folder, you'll see that we've got a file called config.php. Now we can get rid of this comment, but please do give Trongate a star on GitHub. There's a couple of things that I really want you to be aware of. The first is that, see this thing here for environment, you'll see that it's set on dev. Okay, now if I change that to something like live, for example, then refresh, you'll see that our API Explorer is disabled. Furthermore, if we go back to the admin panel, it's forcing us to log in. So let me reassure you, all security variables have been considered and we are good. Now when you go live, you can call this live or test or production or anything you want. As long as it does not say dev when you go live, you should be cool. But we're just developing, right? And we're on localhost, so it's on dev. That means that we can in fact go to the URL and go to tasks/manage and we get straight in, okay? But only because we are on dev mode. The second thing that I want to make you aware of is this base URL constant here. In PHP, we often write variables like this, but a constant is slightly different because we don't need a $sign and they use capital letters. So we can go anywhere in a Trongate app. We can go here in a controller, a view file, anywhere you want. And if we echo base URL, or you can actually type print base URL if you're not familiar with PHP, same thing. I'll do a little die statement, and you'll see that this always produces the base URL, which is of course the URL that typically displays the home page if we go there. Okay, and obviously we set our base URL here. In a live situation, you might change that to something else, like, you know, example.com or something like that. Okay, so those are just a couple of things that I wanted to draw your attention to. Also, our database has all been set up automatically. In fact, here on PHPMyAdmin, there's API tutorial, there's our tasks table, and we've already got our tasks here. It all just works. Alright, now let's take a closer look at these endpoints here. Figure out what they mean, where they're coming from, and how we can change them and interact with them. First of all, you can see we've got a request type, an endpoint name, URL segments, and a description. The very first one has an endpoint name called get, and you can see that the description says fetch rows from table. It's over on the top right hand side there. Now, if we click into that, and then I'll zoom you in just a little bit. If we hit submit, you'll see that it says 401 unauthorized, and then it says server response invalid token. Bit of a downer, right? However, if we tick bypass authorization, then click submit, now suddenly we have all of our row data or table rows coming back in JSON format. As a matter of fact, I can copy that, take you to this little website here, paste in. I'll just format this, and on the right hand side you can hopefully see that that's our data displayed very nicely. Kinda cool, right? So that is what I'm calling the get endpoint. It gets the data from the rows. Now if you want, you can jump up here and add things like ID equals 2, for example, bypass authorization, submit, and you can refine this, but we're not going to really go into that today. What I do want to make you aware of though is that if we go into modules, tasks, assets, API.json, you'll see a big giant file here. Well, it's not that big. It's big because I'm zoomed in. And right here is where all of our endpoints are defined. And they are defined in a JSON format. If you're not familiar with JSON, don't worry. It's really easy. It's one line of code actually. And it's just a special format that we use for, usually for sharing data actually, among different pages and applications. So if you take, for example, this, see how this says fetch rows from table? This one at the top, right? Fetch rows from table. If we go back, you'll see on the top right here, fetch rows from table. I hope you can see that and it's not being obscured by my picture. See how it says fetch rows from table? So we could say fetch rows from tasks table. Save, refresh, and there you go. So we have control. Oh hallelujah! Oh hallelujah! So in the case of the get one, for example, this is the name of it here. I could have added anything. I could have called this banana. Okay, save, refresh, see how it says endpoint name banana? Well, we'll call it get, it's a little bit more sensible. And you can see that it has a few different bits and pieces. We've got some URL segments. Now this is where we go to access the endpoint. And you can see here that we've got authorization, roles, admin. That means that in order to access this, you have to present a token that proves that you are an admin. or you have a user level of admin. Now, this API manager that comes with the Trongate framework can handle all sorts of sophisticated authorization situations. Whatever you want to do, this can handle it, I guarantee. However, for the purposes of this tutorial, let's make life easy. I'm going to take this out and I'm going to just say authorization, and in double quotations I'm going to have a little asterisk. So that means anyone is authorized to access this endpoint. I'm just going to have it wide open, okay? So let me save that. And if I now go back in to this endpoint here, I'm going to click submit, but without pressing bypass authorization. And as you can see, it's presenting the data. No more token requirements or anything like that. Furthermore, if I go down to the bottom here and copy this part that says API/get/tasks, well, now if I add that onto our base URL, we can actually see the endpoint. I'll zoom you in. So this is our endpoint here doing its thing. It's really just a web page URL. That's all an endpoint is. So again, if I bring back the authorization, save, refresh, it says invalid token, but we are wide open and it's giving us the data. Pretty easy, right? Pretty straightforward, hopefully. Now, what we're going to be doing in this live tutorial, I wonder if anyone else is in the room. Man, I'm unpopular. Anyway, in this tutorial, what I'm going to be doing is building a page that lets us interact with Trongate's API Explorer. So if we go to tasks, manage, of course, we've got all of this up and running. This all works. We can update and everything. But again, this is using PHP. As good as this is, and yes, it's comments and everything, it is PHP, but we're going to be using JavaScript. So I'm going to ask you to open up your tasks controller file, and somewhere on this file I want you to create an index method. Remember folks, a method is just a function that's inside a class. If you already have an index method on this page, you have my permission to either rename it or delete it. And once again, if your code looks different from mine, don't worry. Code changes from time to time, but the fundamentals of this framework never change. So let's say function index, and we'll do a little echo, hello, like this, okay? And I'm going to save it. Okay, a little index method. Now, if we go to the base URL /tasks, you can see that it says hello. Now, of course, that would also work if we said /index, but we don't need to say index. It's kind of a default, okay? So, on this URL right here, we're going to construct a fantastic, this coffee is freezing cold already, it is so cold here. I have a water distiller, a heater, none of it's working. Anyway, we're going to build a nice page right here for doing our tasks CRUD. So to kick this one off, I'm going to say data view underscore file is tasks. Then I'm going to say this load up a template, and I'm going to use the public template. Trongate has an admin template as well. I'll just use the public one. I'm going to pass in the data and save. Now, if I refresh the page, you'll see that it's trying to load a view file up. It's trying its best, but it cannot find it. So I'm going to go into this views directory, which is part of the tasks module. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it, now what did I call it actually? Tasks it was called. So I'll call it tasks.php. There you go. So now we're going to add a little bit of HTML, and we'll make this really simple. we'll have an H1 that says your tasks. Save it and refresh. There you go. Page is looking nice. Then I'm going to have a paragraph with a button. And the button is going to say create new task and save it. So there's our nice little button. Now the idea here, folks, is that we're going to have this list. I'll show you what I'm thinking of, right? I'm thinking of something that looks like this, where we have different tasks like this, and this is what our page is going to look like. And so this unordered list is going to contain our tasks list. I'm going to give this a little ID equal to tasks-list, and I'm going to just clear out these list items here. So as you can see, we've got an empty list. Now if we save and refresh, obviously you cannot see the list because there's nothing there. And so what we're going to do to begin is we're going to make a request to our API endpoint. Which API endpoint? Well, it's going to be the get endpoint, this one here that we were looking at a minute ago. Now, let's do something cool. When the page first appears, let's give them a little animation, a little spinner to let them know that stuff is happening. We can do this really easy with the Trongate framework by simply having a div with a class of spinner. I'm going to save, refresh, and it's as easy as that. Can you see the little spinner in the middle of the page? Kind of easy. So we're going to have a little spinner, and then we're going to have JavaScript heading off and fetching those tasks, okay? So would you like to take a trip into the world of JavaScript? Shall we? Shall we dance? Yes, we shall. So I'm going to do a little script tag here. And as soon as this page appears, I'm going to invoke a function called fetch tasks like this. Now this is all going to be vanilla JavaScript, right? There'll be a couple of things that I've got that come with the framework, but pretty much vanilla JavaScript all the way. So let's make a function up and we'll call it fetch tasks like this, okay? So what this is going to do is it's going to fetch the tasks from our API endpoint and display them on the page. Now in order to do this, the very first thing that we have to do is determine what the target URL is. So I'm going to say const target URL equals. Now, do you remember earlier on I was saying that if we reference base URL, like we see here, it's going to give us, funnily enough, the website base URL. Okay, so I'm going to break into PHP and echo with short tags base URL like this, because I like using full URLs when I'm doing this type of thing. Then I'm going to go to the API Explorer. Here's our get endpoint here, a little modal helper, and you see where it says URL segments down on the bottom left? I'm copying it and I'm going to paste in like so. And that, my friend, is the target URL. That's where we're going to be sending our request. And by the way, we can test this. We can do a little console.log target URL, save, and if I right click on the page, I'm going to choose inspect. I'll click on console, then I'm going to reload. Now keep an eye on the bottom left. Can you see how it's giving us that URL? And that is, of course, the URL, apologies for my bleeping watch, that is the URL where we get our tasks from. We can even right click and open a new tab, and there it is. Okay. So, shall we make this work? Alright, Now there's a few different ways of doing what's called an HTTP request in JavaScript. You can use a thing called Fetch API, and there's a bunch of different ways. I'm going to give you the syntax that I like to use. However, if you have any other syntax, then that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. But for me, I'm going to just say const HTTP is new XML HTTP request. There we go. Then I'm going to say http.open. Now this is expecting two arguments. The first is the request type. This is going to be a GET request. And the second argument is going to be the target URL. So I'll add in target URL. Then I'm going to just say http.send. I'm not sending anything across really, I'm just accessing the API endpoint. And when that's done, I'm going to be invoking http.onload equals, and we'll have a function. Now, every API endpoint that you access on the internet is going to respond with an HTTP response code, which is just a number, and also some response text, sometimes called a response body. Now, if I take you to the Trongate documentation, the Trongate framework documentation, I have a page here for understanding, or called Understanding HTTP Response Status Codes, and it's all here. You can look up all of these numbers and see what they mean. As you can see, 200 means OK, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. I have left a link to this in the description, and you're very welcome to check that out if you want. Again, it's in the documentation for the Trongate framework. Now, as far as we're concerned, we're expecting that number to come back, and we can get that by saying console.log http.status. So that's going to give us the HTTP response code that I was mentioning. Then we're going to have the response text, sometimes called the body. So to get that, I'm just going to console.log http.response text and save. Now let's go back to the page, and we're going to refresh and look carefully on the bottom left. Can you see that we've got a 200 response code? And by the way, that means OK, so everything went well. And can you also see that we have our response text here, and it's all of that JSON that represents the data from our tasks table. Pretty cool, right? So, what do we do? Well, in plain English, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove the spinner. Because don't forget, we've got a little spinner on the page here. So I'm going to say const spinner is document.query selector, and it's an element with a class of spinner, so dot spinner. And to remove it, we simply say spinner.remove and then parenthesis. Now we can test this by saving and refresh, and you'll see that the spinner disappears. I mean, it's so fast you can hardly even see the thing. Nevertheless, that's doing its job, and the spinner is now being removed. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn the response text into an array of tasks. Because remember, this text is just a string, it's just a bunch of text. We have to turn this into a bunch of tasks. So I'm going to say const tasks equals, and the way that we do this is we say JSON.parse, and we do that to HTTP response text. There you go. Okay. Pretty straightforward and pretty cool. Now we're going to loop through the tasks and add to the tasks list UL, you know, the list thing. So I'm probably going to be mentioning or referencing this task list a few times here. So right at the top of our JavaScript, let's make life easy and we'll say const tasks list in camel case, tasks list equals, and it's going to be document. Now you can say get element by ID, that's fine. Or you can say query selector, it's entirely up to you. I'll use query selector today. So it's a hash symbol, tasks hyphen list. That means that we can reference this anywhere in our code, even inside one of these, and it will know that we're referring to this list here. By the way, can I say a little word about case and snake case and camel case and stuff like that? I have received a little amount of criticism from a few naysayers, usually Laravel developers, who find great amusement in the fact that I like to use snake case with PHP. Well, as you can see, I use camel case when I'm using JavaScript, but I use snake case personally when I'm using PHP. Now I'm going to repeat what I've said a gazillion times and what I've said in the documentation. I don't care if you use snake case, camel case, Pascal case, or any other case. Do whatever makes you feel good. But just so you know, there's two reasons why I like to use snake case with PHP. One is because it avoids ambiguity, which I'm not going to go into. But the other reason is because Trongate is trying to be a framework for PHP developers who love pure PHP. That's why it's so fast. And if you look at PHP as a language, think about your favorite PHP functions, the ones that you use every day. You'll find, with only a few exceptions, that they are in snake case. Therefore, if you're building a framework that is, and let's remind ourselves of the benchmarks here. If you're building a framework that has these ridiculous benchmarks, can you see this? Can you see the benchmarks? And you're saying pure PHP is back, and this is for people who love pure PHP. Does it, well, I have no idea how I made that appear, but does it not make sense to write the syntax in a way that is in alignment with the core technology? Of course it does. And where, oh where, are the Laravel naysayers? Well, they're not here, but a few friends are. It's a hi to Stefan. How are you doing, Stefan? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Nice to see you. We have Dan's stuff in the house all of the way from America. Can you believe it? And my old friend Derek in there in Belgium. Nice to see you, Derek. How on earth are you doing? I thought I would do something different today and do a live tutorial, you know. Alright, so let's get back to this. Very nice to see you folks. Very nice to see you. So, anyway, you can see that our stuff is being returned. You can see that we've removed the spinner, and there you go. So now I'm going to loop through these tasks. Now again, there's different ways that you can loop through things with JavaScript. I'm going to do a little for loop here. And rather than read this out, I'm just going to zoom you in. If you need to pause the screen, please go ahead and do so. But I'm looping through the tasks, okay? And as we loop through the tasks, for each and every task, I'm going to say add task to list. And I'm passing in what is effectively a task object. So, let's build this. I'll head to the top. I'm going to say function, add task to list. It's taking in a task object. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a list item. How do we do that? We say const new li equals document dot create element li. It's a list item. Did you know that you can create elements dynamically in JavaScript like this? Pretty cool, right? The next thing I'm going to do, and I'll do lots of comments so that this is really clear, right? Let's give the list item an ID. That will come in useful later on. Now, the task object has got an ID, by the way. How do we know? Well, if we look at what comes back, you'll see we've got an ID, we've got a title, we've got finished. And of course, the ID corresponds with the ID on the tasks table. So we can do something like this. We can say const element ID equals, now I'm going to say task object dot ID, but hold on a second. That's going to just give us a number like 1 or 2 or 3. Now it actually would work. However, it's not best practices to have an element ID that's just a number. Therefore, let's have it so that it starts with task hyphen, then we'll concatenate our actual ID here. That is going to be our element ID. So we're going to get the list, or give the list item an ID, I should say. And we do that by simply saying new li dot set attribute. It's going to be an ID, and it's going to be equal to this element ID. Perfect. So we've created a list item that's going to give us something like this. Okay, we've now given the list item an ID, which is going to be something like ID equals task 1, for example. And now we're going to add text to the list item. So the way that we do that is we say new list item dot inner text equals, and it's going to be task object dot title. Simple as that, okay? Finally, we're going to add the new element, that's the list item, onto the list, okay, the UL thing. Okay, and the way that we do that is we say tasks list dot append child, and we're adding on a child element of the new li, and save. So if we go back here and refresh, you can see that now our list is populating and everything is fantastical. Just look at how fast this is. I never meant that. Haha. And that, I tell you folks, it is so cold in here. These are mishits because it is unbelievably cold. Anyway, there's our thing, okay? However, you may recall that at the start of this, I said that task 3 was finished. You can see how it's got a finished value of 1. So let's see if we can find a cool way to indicate that the task is finished. What I'm going to do is something like this. I'm going to say if task object dot finished is equivalent to 1, then I'm going to add a class to the element. You'll see what I mean. So I'm going to say new li set attribute. I'm going to have a class, let's say, and we'll call it task hyphen finished. So this is going to add a class of task hyphen finished. And what's that going to do? Well, anything you like. However, I'm going to go upstairs. We'll do a little bit of styling. I'll just do it on the page for speed. I'm going to say dot task finished, and it's going to be text decoration line through, and save it. So now when we refresh our page, you can see that the third task has got a line going through it, clearly indicating that the task is finished. Okay, so that's us successfully reading our tasks. That's the U of CRUD. How am I doing, folks? How am I doing? Christian, it's a hi to you. Ding, 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 ding. Thank you, thank you, thank you. How are you doing, Christian? Very nice to see you. Very nice to see you. I hope you're doing well. All right, so that's us reading our tasks. Now, the next thing we're going to work on is creating tasks. As you would expect, this is super easy. So what we're going to do is on this create new task, I'm going to say onClick equals, and we'll make up some name. Let's call it init create task, and then we'll do parenthesis. So we're going to make a little function here. Maybe we can have it here, called init create task. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up a modal on the page, so a little pop-up window that's going to have a nice form, and we're going to be able to submit that and create tasks. It's going to be fantastic. So first thing we'll do is we'll build our modal. This is just going to be HTML here, right? So we'll go underneath our HTML here and look at how easy it is to build a modal with Trongate. We do a div with a class rather of modal. Okay, pretty easy, right? Then we do another div with a class of modal heading, and I'll just write create task. Then I'll do another div with a class of modal body, and in here we'll have a little paragraph that says please fill out the form and then hit submit. Okay, so that is the code that is going to give us a nice little pop-up modal. Now there's two more things we have to do to bring this to life. The first is we're going to give this an ID. I'm going to call it task-modal. You can call it anything you want, by the way, as long as it's a valid ID. And finally, I want the modal to be hidden by default. So I'm going to say style equals display of none and save. Now, if we refresh the page, you cannot see the modal, but we know that it's there because we wrote the code. So when this thing gets clicked, this init create task, or this button up here, we are going to have this running, and it's going to open up the modal. Watch how easy this is. We're just going to type open modal, and we're going to pass in the ID of the modal. And as you can see, it's task-modal. So we pass that in, little semicolon if you want. Save it, and check this. We refresh, we click. Hallelujah! How easy was that? Isn't it fantasticola? Yes, it is. So that's how you create a modal. Now I'm going to build a form. I'll just do some form tags like this. We don't even need action. We are in the land of JavaScript. And I'm going to build some form elements. Now, you can, if you want, write ordinary HTML. There's nothing up with that. But I like using Trongate syntax because it's easier and it has less characters. A bit like the chat room. Has less characters. Could do with a few more characters here, man. I'm so unpopular. You know, I was watching I caught a glimpse of an Indian developer last night teaching a load of garbage, and the dude's got 250,000 subs, and he was saying, oh, just beginners use pure CSS and pure JavaScript. You need to use Tailwind. And I thought, holy moly. Anyway, I am grateful for the folks that are here. God bless you all. God bless you all. And as far as I'm concerned, each and every one of you is worth 1 billion viewers. Anyway, for the purposes of speed, I'm going to use Trongate syntax. So I'm going to go into PHP. I'm going to echo form label. And our first form field is going to be title. So we'll have a little label for the title, and I'll close this off before I forget. Next, I'm going to build up an array of attributes. So I'll have an ID equal to task title input. Now this is an ID that's going to be attached to the form element, right? Then I'll say attribute placeholder, and I'll say enter task title here. And finally, you don't need to do this, but I'm going to say attribute autocomplete is off. I don't want any autocomplete things that can be a little bit annoying, okay? So I've created an array of attributes. Now you can use different syntax if you want, that's absolutely fine. But the upshot is I'm going to echo form input. I'm going to call this title. We'll say it's empty by default, and we're going to pass in our array of attributes. Save. We're going to go back, refresh, have a click, and there is our form. Now I'm going to echo a little paragraph, and I'm going to give it a class of text left like this. I'll close it off, and inside this paragraph I'm going to have a checkbox. So I'm going to echo form checkbox. I'm going to call it finished, and this will have a default value of 1, but we'll say that by default it's unchecked, which means false. So we'll do that, and then beside it I'm just going to echo the word finished. Save, refresh, have a click, and don't it make you feel good? Now I'm going to add a couple of buttons. So I'll just echo form button, not form submit, by the way, because we're using JavaScript. I'll give this button a name of submit, a value of submit. That's fine. And then I'll do another form button. I'll call this one cancel and give it a value of cancel with an uppercase C. But I'm also going to add an array with a class of alt. So I'm adding in a class of alt because I want the cancel button to look different from the submit button. Let's save, let's refresh, and there you go. How easy is this, folks? And do keep in mind I'm zoomed in a little bit, so yours might look more like this, okay? Okay, now let's bring this form to life. The first thing I want to do is get it so that when I click the cancel button, I want the modal to close. So to do that, I'm going to add on to the array here, a little comma. I'm going to say onClick is assigned to, and we're going to invoke a function called close modal and pass in parenthesis. So this is a function that comes with Trongate. It's going to look for any modal that's open, and it's going to close it. Let me just save and I'll demonstrate this. We can click, we can hit cancel, and it's as easy as that all day long. Now we're going to do the real business part of this, which is of course the submit button. So again, I'll pass in an array and I'll say onClick. We'll have this assigned to submit task like this, okay? So this is going to invoke a function called submit task. So let's go back to the JavaScript. Here it is. We're going to say function submit task, and in plain English, let's just write down what we want to happen. So first of all, let's fetch the form data. Again, plain English, right? Then once we've got the form data, let's close the modal, which makes sense. Then we're going to post the data to an API endpoint. And then we are going to later add the new record onto the page. So that's what we're going to do. So how do we do this? Kind of easy. First thing we'll do is we'll say const task title input is document.querySelector, and it's called task title input. So I'm referencing this here. Remember we gave it an ID of task title input? And just to show you, if we inspect, yes, it does have that ID. So we reference this, right? And then we can say const title equals task title input dot value. There you go. So that's going to give us the value. Do you have faith? Me too. So let's now look at the finished one. So const finished checkbox equals document.querySelector, and you'll remember that we gave our finished checkbox. Actually, we didn't give it an ID. That was today's deliberate mistake of the day. But we know how to give this an ID, don't we? Yep. Again, just passing in an array, I'll say ID is assigned to finished hyphen checkbox. Simple as that. And so now we are looking for finished checkbox. Okay, there it is. There it is. And what we want to do is check to see if the thing is checked. Now, when it's a checkbox, we don't do dot value. That's not how we do it. Instead, I'm going to say const finished equals, and I'm going to use one of those ternary operators. A ternary operator is like a shorthand way of doing an if-else statement. So all we have to say is, if the finished checkbox is checked, so dot checked, then we're going to have a finished value of 1, otherwise 0. So you remember this by thinking of the two dots, meaning otherwise. This is how you remember, right? So that's a ternary operator. Now, that's us fetching the form data. Let's turn the form data into an object, into a JavaScript object actually. How do we do that? We say const params equals, and I'm going to have the title, and I'm also going to have finished. So before we go any further, let's just make sure that this works. So I'm going to console.log JSON.stringify params, save it. Let's have a lucky refresh. I'm going to create task. I'm going to type my new task. I'll tick finished. Now keep an eye on the bottom left. Boom, there you go. See? And if this is not ticked, you'll see that it says finished is 0. Now folks, there's all sorts of validation that we can do, even on the client side. For example, we can say things like attribute required equals true. And so what that means is if we have a submit button, that'll work and things. But you know what? I'm getting all mixed up. I'm going to keep this tutorial really simple. And I'm not going to do any server or client side validation. I'm not going to do even validation errors, at least not any decent ones. Otherwise, we'll be here till Christmas. Instead, I want us to just close the modal, and we can do that quite easily. And then we'll post to the endpoint, okay? So to close the modal, I'm going to say const, let's call it task modal is document.querySelector, and it has an ID of task hyphen modal. Actually, I'm an idiot. We can just say close modal. I forgot. There we go. Close modal. Simple as that, okay? So I'll just test that. Save. New task. I'm going to hit submit. And there you go, perfect. So we're now going to post this to an API endpoint. Just like before, we do this by setting up a target URL. So I'm going to say const target URL equals, same as last time, it's base URL. Now for creating a record, have a look at the Explorer here. And you can see that we've got one down here that says create. If we click on this, very helpfully, this pre-populates, gives us a little start out of the blocks. But beware, because if we submit, you'll see that it says endpoint not activated since no authorization rules have been declared. So, if you have a look at the API.json file, find the thing that says create, and you'll notice, just like the error message suggests, we don't have any authorization rules here. Now remember that this was generated automatically, and I was happy to give people, you know, a couple of rules, maybe 2 or 3, make sure they're logged in as an administrator. But really and truly, you should be setting your own rules, and that's what we're going to do here. Now for the purposes of this one, again, we'll just keep it wide open. So I'm going to say authorization, add in a little asterisk and save. So now, if we submit this one, you can see we're getting a 200 response, everything is okay, and it's returning a JSON representation of the new record. We can even see that it's got an ID of 4. Sure enough, if we go to the database, browse, there's the new record, and don't it make you feel good? Let's do one more. So if we say task 5, let's say, my hands are so cold, I'll say that this one's finished. So task 5, we're going to submit. There's our response. Here's the database, and it is perfect. So we now have an API endpoint for creating tasks that's all ready to go. I'm going to copy these URL segments here, head back to the JavaScript, and where we've got this target URL, I'm adding on the URL segments here. So that's our URL. Now to submit this, it's pretty much the same as last time. We say const HTTP is new XML HTTP request, and then I'm going to say http.open. Now this time it's a post request. We know this because it says request type post. So we're doing a post request to the target URL, and we are going to be posting some stuff, of course the form data, and we're going to be posting it in a JSON format. So for that reason, I'm going to say http.setRequestHeader. I'm going to say content type, and then comma application /JSON. So that creates a little header, a little thing on the header. How's that for being technical? That lets our API endpoint know that we are sending JSON. Now I'm going to just say http.send, but this time I want to attach the form data to the request. So the way that we do that is inside the parenthesis, I'm going to say json.stringify params. Simple as that. Now, just like last time, when that's finished, we're going to invoke http.onload as a function. And as you would expect, that is going to give us, in fact, I'll do some console.logs. It's going to give us a status code, and also I'll console.log the response text. And I really want you to see this, you know. So let's save. We'll go back to the page. Now I'm going to click create new task. I'm going to type in it works. I'll tick finished, and I'll click submit. And look on the bottom left. Do you see how we've got an ID of 6, a title of it works, and a finished value of 1? over to the database. There's our task, and everything is fantastic. So obviously we don't want to just console.log the thing. We are going to, and I'll leave lots of comments, turn the response text into a JavaScript object. So how do we do that? Well, we've done it before. I'm just going to say const task object is json.parse HTTP response text. Okay, now I suppose we should actually say if http.status is 200, then we're going to do this, okay? I mean, you know, it's possible that there could be an error, right? Incidentally, if not, I'll just alert the HTTP response text. It's the worst validation errors ever, but it'll do for now. In any event, we have our response text. We've turned it into an object, and we are going to add task to list, and we're passing in the task object and save it. So check this out. I'm going to create new task. I'll say super cool. I'm going to hit submit, and as you can see, our task was instantly and immediately added onto the page. That means that we've now taken care of reading, creating. So now we're going to look at deleting and updating tasks. So here's what we'll do. When we add tasks onto a list here, I'm going to have a little function called add buttons to li, list item, let's say. So I'm going to make a little function that accepts an item, let's say this new li thing, and we're going to add some buttons. So here we go, function add buttons to li. Now remember, this is taking in a list item, a target list item, and this is going to create we'll start with a delete button. So how do we do that? I'm going to say const delete btn is document.create element button. So I'm dynamically creating a button with pure JavaScript. And then I'm going to say that the delete button has some inner HTML, and I'm going to add a little icon. It just so happens that this particular page is using font awesome, so I'm going to say class equals fa trash, and that's going to give us our font awesome icon. I may in the future do a custom icon set for Trongate because font awesome gets rewritten and I don't like rewrite culture. So if you're watching this deep into the future, I apologize if this doesn't work, but hopefully it will. Anyway, that's going to give us our button with a little trash icon, and we are going to now say target li append child of delete button. Okay, now let's save that and refresh, and you can see that we've got a whole bunch of buttons that have been added here. Now with the button, I'm going to add a couple of classes. So let's say delete btn set attribute. The first class is going to be xs. I want it to be small. XS means extra small, right? So if we save and refresh, you can see that the button is much smaller. The next class that I'm going to add is a class of danger. I want to change the button to a red color, and danger is a commonly used class name for doing this. And by the way, you can stack classes like this. It's perfectly valid. So I'll do that. Now, if you refresh and your button has gone red, congratulations. I might do that in a future version of the framework. But for the moment, I'm going to have to manually make this danger class work. But don't worry, it's quite easy. We just go to the style section, we say dot danger, background color, I'll make it a really deep red, so hash 991234, and then I'll say border 1 pix 991234 solid. Save, refresh, and don't forget to smile. And by the way, for the purposes of this one, I'll also say margin left 3M. Why not? Gives us a little bit of daylight, okay? Alright, so that's that. Now when we hover, by the way, do you see how it's going blue? It's very easy to change that. I'll just copy this. I'm going to say colon hover, and then I'll change these colors and make it go to a bright red, like FF0000. Save. We don't need this margin here because it stays the same, but we're going to save and refresh, and look at the beautiful delete button. Okay, so we have add buttons to LI. We've got a delete button. I'm also going to create an edit button. Now we'll bring them to life later on, right? So in fact, I'll just type it out because it's a tutorial. So create an edit button. So same again, const edit btn is document.create element. It's a button. And again, I'll say edit button set attribute. Let's have a class of XS. It'll make it extra small. Then I'll say edit button inner HTML, and again I'll add a little icon in. So I'll say I class equals, and this time we'll go with FA hyphen pencil. Okay, so that's going to be our inner HTML, and once again I'll say target li dot append child of edit button. Save, refresh, there you go. Now if you want, you can add a little bit of margin in, that's absolutely fine, but it's just a tutorial, so I'll keep it as it is, okay? Obviously in real life you'd have it a million times better than this. Alright. So, now we are going to bring our delete button to life. The way that we'll do that is we'll say delete button dot add event listener. We're going to listen out for a click. When somebody clicks, it's going to give us an event object. And we are going to call init delete task, and I'm going to pass in that clicked element. The button, the icon, whatever it may be. I'm going to just say event.target. That's the clicked element, okay? So, let's build this. I'll head upstairs just because we can. I'm going to say function init delete task. Now keep in mind, this is accepting a clicked element. That's what we've passed in. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say get the containing list item. So the way that we do that is we say const containing li is going to be clicked element dot closest, and it's the closest element that has a tag of li. There you go. Then I'm going to get the ID of this task. So how do we do that? Well, we can say const element ID is containing list element.id, but remember, all of these things have got IDs that are like, task -1 and things like that. So we're going to say const target task ID, and it's going to be element ID dot replace task hyphen with emptiness. That's going to produce a target task ID. So now that we've done that, we're going to send a request to the API, actually send a delete record request to the API. Now how do we do that? Over to the API Explorer again, and if you have a look round, you'll see right down here there's one for delete one. There it is right there. It's expecting a delete request, okay? So if you look at the URL segments, you can see that this one has a placeholder. That means that we have to pass in the ID in the URL. So, well, I suppose the first thing we should do is go to api.json, and we're going to open up this endpoint. So delete one, I'll just say comma, authorization all, that's going to make it open. This is the URL segments. So we're going to say const target URL equals, we'll chuck in that base URL again, just break it into PHP, paste in the URLs, and don't forget we have to append, I'm joining on, the target task ID. So that's the target URL where our delete requests go. So we can then say const http equals new XML HTTP request. I'm going to say http.open. This is a delete request to the target URL. Then I'm going to just say http.send. We're sending the request. And then I'll just say http.onload is a function. And as you would expect, that's going to give us a status and a response text. But I'm just going to make life easy. I'm going to say if the status is 200, then remove the task from the list. And how do we do that? Well, we can simply say containing li.remove. And if something goes wrong, it's a little bit crude, but I'll just alert HTTP response text. Okay, that should do the job. So save that, head back, refresh. I'll keep this console open just in case we need it. And I'm going to try deleting this one. There you go. And if we refresh, it's still gone. So how about this one, and this, and this? Pretty cool, pretty cool. Alright, so we've done create, we've done read, we've done delete. The final thing that we're going to do for this tutorial is update task. So let's go to the add buttons to li thing here. So here we are right here. And what we're going to do with our edit button is we're going to say edit button, add event listener. We're going to have a click event. It's going to listen for an event object. And let's just say init edit task. And again, let's pass in the clicked element, so event.target. Okay, so we'll head upstairs just because it makes me feel good. And I'm going to say function, whoops, init edit task. We're taking in a clicked element. Now, once again, I'm going to get the containing list item. And I can copy this code from here. This is absolutely fine. Okay, so that's going to return the containing li tag, let's say. Then I'm going to get the ID of the task. This is quite important. I'll just copy and paste. It's absolutely fine. But there's to do. I want to get the task title. And the way that I'm going to get that is I'm going to say const title equals, and it's going to be containing li dot inner text. Then I want to get the finished value. So is this task finished or unfinished? Well, for that I'm going to say const finished equals, and I'll use one of those ternary operators. So the first thing we'll do is we'll have to get our finished checkbox. So const finished checkbox is document.querySelector, and it's called finished checkbox. Now, the way that this works is we want to see if the checkbox is checked. So if the finished checkbox is .checked, then our finished value is going to be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. Now, I've just realized that since I'm posting to an API endpoint, I'll make true be 1 and false is going to be 0. Okay. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So now we are going to make this modal appear. So I'm going to just say open modal, and it's the task modal, and I'll save. Now let's just refresh your page. I'm going to click the edit button, and you can see that this appears. However, as you can see, it says create tasks. This is empty. It's all a little bit depressing, don't you think? So what we're going to do is right at the top of our code, and this will make sense in just a minute, I'm going to create some variables. This is going to be very useful. I'm going to say let current task title is empty. This is going to be like a default, you know. I'm going to say let current finished value is false. And also, even higher up, let's just say let current task ID is 0. So these are going to be like 3 default values that we have. And whenever we open the modal, even if it's on the init create task, as soon as we open this modal, we're going to call populate form like this immediately after the modal opens. So we'll do it here on create task, and we'll also do this here on init edit task. So populate form. So we're going to build a nice little function here. I'll do it right here. Populate form. So, do you see how we're getting these values here? And I've said const target task ID. I'm going to change this to current task ID. We don't need to say let or const because we've set it upstairs, which means it's available globally. So let's go like that. Okay, we've changed the current task ID. I'm going to get the current task title and change that. Then I'm going to get the current finished value. So let's just say current finished value. And by the way, I think I made a mistake. That should be true or false. Okay, there we go. All right. Now, when we populate the form, first thing I want to do is get, you see the bit that says create task at the top? I want that to say update task. I'm going to say const modal heading is document.querySelector, and it's a class of modal heading. Now we'll do another one of those ternary operators. Const modal heading text equals. Now, if the current task ID is greater than 0, then I want the heading text to be update task. Otherwise, I want it to be create task. That being the case, now I'm going to say modal heading, inner text equals, and it's going to be modal heading text. Now just to prove that this works, I'll save, I'll hit update. You can see it says update task, and if I hit create, you miserable swine. Ah, do you know why that is? It's because when we create a task, we have to reset these values. Let me copy this. I'm going to go to init create task, and every time init create task gets called, we will set these values. We don't need to say let, by the way. They're global variables. That's what we're going to do. Save. So here we go. Update task, close, create task. Perfect. Okay. That is exactly what we want. All right. So now back to the populate form thing. We are going to say const task title input is document query selector, and it's an ID of task title input. And we're going to say that task title input dot value is going to be the current task title. Again, this is our global value here, and that should be fine. Let's just quickly test this. So there you can see it says task 2, and if we create a new task, it's empty. Excellent. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get that all-important checkbox. Here it is here. So const finished checkbox, and we're going to just say finished checkbox dot checked equals current finished value. Let's save it. Refresh. Now, when this comes up, these are all unfinished. So I'm going to just browse, and I'll manually change task 2 to finished. So we'll give it an ID of 1. You can see that that's finished. It's scored out. And look at how when I click on this, you miserable thing. Ah, gee. Give me a minute. Console.log current finished value. Oh, I've done this wrong. When we edit the task, we find out if it's finished by checking the class list. That's what we do. So we're going to say, right, check to see if the task is finished by checking for task finished class. That was today's other deliberate mistake of the day. Okay, so I'm going to say const current finished value equals, and we'll do a ternary operator. Now, I do want to get the finish, pardon me, I want to get the containing li here. And I'm going to say that if li.classList.contains, so if it contains a class of task finished, that means that this task must be finished if we've got that class. So if that's the case, then the value is true. Otherwise, it's false. Alright, so save. Apologies for my watch. Let's click. Oh, I said dot task finished. Let me just check something. Current finished value. Right, true, false. So that is working. So we've got finished checkbox dot checked equals there it is. I said const current finished value. It's the global variable. So it's current finished value globally. This is going to work. There you go. Finished and unfinished. So there's our checkbox. Okay. Well, I hope I've kept you on your toes with all of that. Right. So that's looking fantastic. We now have our form populated. So if we create, the form's empty. If we update, the form is populated. So we'll finish this tutorial up by getting the endpoint activated for updating tasks. So I'll go to api.json. There's our update endpoint. I'll just add in the authorization here. So authorization all. There it is. There's our authorization set. You can see the endpoint URL here, and you can see that this is expecting a put request. So I'm going to just go to submit task. You can see that this is fetching the values. It's closing the modal. Now remember that this is going to be called regardless of whether we are creating or updating. So what I'm going to do is a little if statement just to make this easier to read. I'm going to say if current task ID is greater than 0, I'm going to invoke let's call it submit update task, and I'll pass in the params. Otherwise, I'll invoke submit create task and I'll pass in the params. And how about if we copy this stuff here, copying it, and right here I'll say function submit create task, takes in a bunch of params, and I think that that is going to be perfect. Now let me copy this, paste in. Now we're going to have submit update task. So we're going to send the data to an API endpoint. So if we're talking about updating a task, here's our endpoint. It's API update tasks, and then we pass in the task ID. I'm going to just join on or concatenate current task ID like this. So we have our params. We are sending the parameters across. Everything is beautiful. But when we do an update request, and let me just show you how this works. So let's say we say 2. Again, it gives us a little helping hand. I'll just say, here we go. I'm going to hit submit. And you can see that this is returning some JSON that represents our database record. So it's very similar to what we had. But instead of add task to list, we'll say update task on list. So let's build this. I'll have it next door to add task to list because these are kind of similar. So function update task on list. We're taking in a task object. So what do? Well, first of all, let's get the target list item. So I'm going to say const target list item is, well, we first of all have to get the ID. So const target element ID is going to be, now have a look at our lists. You'll see that they've all got IDs of task hyphen. So task hyphen, and I'm going to join on task object dot ID. That's giving us our element ID. So the target LI, I'm going to just say document get element by ID, and I'm going to pass in the target element ID. Okay, so that's giving us this, and I'm now going to say target, well, let's just update the text within the LI. So we simply say target LI dot inner text equals task object dot title. That's how it works, right? Then we are going to say, I think I'll do an if statement here. So deal with task finished or unfinished situations. So how do we do this, right? Well, let's say if task object dot finished is equivalent to 1, then we are going to say that the target LI set attribute class is task finished. So we make sure it has that line through if it's finished. Otherwise, I'll say target LI class list dot remove task finished. You could have said set attribute class empty if you want, but I think that's a bit more graceful. Okay, so let's save this, refresh, and let's give this a test. So I'll click this, and where it says here we go, I'm going to say here I go, submit, and it's been updated. Now, one mistake I can see is that we did not add in the task buttons there. So let's just say add buttons to LI. We'll pass in the target LI, save. Let's try this again. So I'll say here I go again on my own, submit. There you go. Now I'm going to edit again. I'll say going down the only road I've ever known. I'll make this one finished. There you go. So let's create super cool, and again I can see that we've got 2 super cools, so we can delete, and that is it. So that concludes our tutorial. It took a wee while, but I can't really figure out a faster way of doing vanilla JavaScript. If you know a faster way, then please do let me know. But I do hope that this was useful, and I hope that it gave you some idea of how the Trongate API Manager works. I want to say a huge thank you to you for being here, and if you enjoy these live tutorials, that's live, with no notes or anything like that, I think that was pretty obvious, then do let me know and do give this one a thumbs up.